quick video, are we really engaged in the process, or are we just checking boxes? This is something that I've thought about recently because I've seen this in a lot in particular clubs I'm working in and I'm working with. And I think we often get caught up. I mean, if you're managing a club, for example, from the macro perspective, I think this might be interesting way of looking at it. And if you're somebody that owns a club, same thing. Or maybe you're just an individual practitioner, a health and fitness practitioner that is running their own business, or working within another larger business, and you're seeing the same thing. And you can easily get caught up in this where you're like, okay, and am I managing the process correctly? Am I prioritizing the process and allowing the process to take care of the results, right? Or are we just checking boxes? Are we becoming slaves to our own systems? Remember, systems are supposed to work for us. They're supposed to work with us. They're not supposed to work against us or create a bureaucracy, create a bunch of red tape so we just end up chasing our tails. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of lately in a particular clubs that I'm working with, is I'm seeing a lot of people falling in love with their own vision, even if that vision is not accomplishing what it was supposed to accomplish. So if it's taking us away from that vision, a lot of times your own ego, saving face, you spend so much time, invested in this system that you've created for yourself, that it's really hard to step away from it or to look at it. And so what I encourage you out there is, sometimes you got to listen to other people, or at least see their viewpoint. If you're a manager and owner, and I'm seeing this a lot, especially if you have a big ego, it's very difficult. And you probably have one if you're a manager or a leader, because that's probably how you got there at some level, and rightfully so. But what I'm seeing right now, for example, in a gym that I'm working with, is it happens to be a gym health club, almost like a resort type of environment. And they have this grand vision for what they want to accomplish. And on paper, it looks wonderful. But logistically speaking, when you put the horses behind the plow here, it's too much. And what they've done is they've created a red tape mess. And rather than step away from that mess and correct it and make it better, what they're really doing is making it more and more difficult. They're doubling down rather than checking their egos at the door. And what I've advised is, hey, look, your systems aren't working here. You need to create, remember, simple is better, guys. It's never better to make things more complicated. You always want to look to simplify whenever you can. I've said this, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. And let's say it one more for a good measure. Don't have a playbook full of 300 plays. Don't have 800 programs. This is too complicated, even for a big organization. And what ends up happening is you have, I don't care how great the idea is, if you can't implement it, what good does it do you, right? I have 1,000 ideas right now that I think are great ideas. I have an ego too. I have 1,000 ideas. It doesn't mean I can implement them though, because maybe I don't have the skill set to do it, or I don't have the people or the financial back, whatever the case may be. But just because an idea is good on paper, just because you've thought it out well on paper, does not make it realistic in terms of what you have to put in it. What are the opportunity costs? Because this particular, for example, this particular system that they have in place, this program they want to do. Now, this particular gym, for example, is not historically great at implementing programs and sticking with them and following through. And I think one of the reasons that it is because they have so many programs. And I've advised, don't have all these programs. Have 2, have 3 that you execute flawlessly. You can get employees behind that. You can get everybody on the same page to understand it thoroughly, and then to be able to back it with action and the proper resources. You can do that for 2 or 3 programs and execute flawlessly. Like the example I always give is the 1960s Green Bay Packers that won all those Super Bowls, right? You would think, oh, they had all these great plays, and he had one of the best coaches of all time in Vince Lombardi, great leadership, all that. Yeah, of course. But what people forget is that team did not have a complicated playbook. They had a very simple playbook. In fact, they had very simple plays, while a lot of the teams around them that didn't win had a lot of complicated plays. Problem is that you can't execute those plays if there's so many of them. Why not have a few plays and execute those flawlessly that everybody can easily get on that play? Because I don't care how dedicated, how great your team is. If you're asking too much of them, if you're creating something that's so overly complex that they can't understand it, how are they then going to be able to execute and explain it and to execute it for the clientele? And remember, guys, nobody buys when they are confused. If you can't explain it simply, then don't do it at all, because it's too complicated. Not only do you have to understand it, but you have to explain to your employees how to do it, and you have to have them be able to explain to the clientele so that they get excited about it. And if you can't do that, right? And I've always said a million times, it doesn't matter what you try to implement at all. If you don't have a sales savvy employee base, good luck executing. Because I don't care whether you want to, I don't care if you believe in sales or not. Okay, I mean, look around you. I mean, you better have some sales skills, some communication skills, some relationship building skills, which are all really sales skills. So my point is, keep it simple, stupid. Do not complicate it. Any opportunity you have to simplify something, do it that way. You don't need a bunch of papers everywhere and a complication and the next fancy thing or reinventing the wheel. I know you all have a vision. Everyone has a vision, but you don't have to reinvent the wheel. All you have to do is execute. Execute flawlessly. And in order to do that, you have to have great, simple systems that work with you and for you. You have to have employees that understand what you're trying, your vision, and keep it simple so they can explain to other people and get them excited about it. And then follow through with it. Follow through, follow through, follow through. And if it doesn't work right away, keep going. I don't say give up on it, but you have to keep it reevaluating. Is this as simple as we can make it? Is there something we're doing wrong? Don't let your ego stand in the way. Don't let your ego say, you know what, I've got to save face here. This is my vision and it doesn't seem to be working. It must be the employee's fault. It must be the fact that they're not following through. Something on their end, right? And before, and one last thing, guys, because this is what happened in this particular case. It could have been easily avoided. In this particular disaster, this dumpster fire of a program / system that they've tried to implement, it was easily avoidable, the traps that they fell in. All they simply had to do, they had plenty of boots on the ground, plenty of lower management that they could have come to at any point in time and, hey, we're thinking about doing X, Y, and Z. What do you think? What are the challenges you believe we'll run up against? What are you seeing on the ground level? What do you think we can do to make it better? These are the issues we're having. We're trying to make it better. We think this is a solution. What are your thoughts? To my knowledge, they did not do that prior. This is what I advised. That was not done prior. So they, in my opinion, foolishly enacted this brand new program, of which the program that they were replacing was not a bad program. They just weren't executing that either. And so what they did was they made it more complicated instead of simplifying, or instead of having the proper training protocols in place to where they could really implement that program flawlessly. They decided to do the opposite, which was, hey, not only are we going to make it more complicated, but we're not even going to go to the people on the floor and ask them, on the ground level, the ones that are implementing this every single day, and say, hey, what can we do better here? And the few people that they did talk to about it had nothing to do with the actual program that they were running. So how would they know? Yeah, so none of it made any sense. And what I'm saying, the only reason I'm saying, I'm not picking out on this one particular gym or health club, but I think that is not that uncommon from what I've seen. And I think a lot of egos got in the way. And in this particular case, when they went to introduce this whole grand idea, they had a big meeting. And I'll never forget this clear as day. The president of the club came to the front of the room. Let's say there's probably 100 people there, I don't know, 75, 100 people. And they said, I don't want to be here in a year from now, and we're talking about the same issues or problems, or we're rehashing the same thing. And the way he said, his tone was very, I don't know, sort of egotistical, and okay, well, if it's almost like leaving you now. Well, if this doesn't work, there's no way it could possibly be, because we never consulted anyone here, and then we decided to make this decision from on high, from the macro perspective, and introduce it to you guys. It can't be any that our idea was terrible or that it was too complicated, or any number of other reasons. It must have been you guys weren't executing. Logistics fuels mission, guys. You cannot give people something to do. Like, yes, you should have high expectations for your staff. If you hire well, and these people are qualified and they're great, okay, and you know that, I hope so, because you hired them, right? If you believe in them like you should and you trust them, well, then whose fault really is it at that point? You have to ask yourself, am I standing in the way of my own success? Am I just checking boxes? And I remember thinking at this meeting, they are going to be back here in a year complaining about the same exact thing. And they're going to, this time, blame it again on the employees. But the people who they should be looking in the mirror in, because it's very predictable, they should have known this wasn't going to work anyway. It's too complicated. And if we're trying to reinvent a wheel, there was nothing wrong with the original wheel. They just weren't hiring, or they weren't training the people to ride the bike correctly. Okay, so they made it more complicated instead. So instead of just keeping the wheels simple, or maybe giving it some training wheels, they decided to make the wheel more complicated. Or this particular bicycle more complicated and make it more user unfriendly. And now you're going to blame it on the rider again. So, you can't always place the blame, the burden on somebody else in management, or even if it's your own business, maybe it's just you. It might just be you. Look in the mirror sometimes. Are you making it more complicated than it needs to be? Don't just become a slave to the system, like, oh, I need this, I need to have a system in place, so let's choose this one and make it all complicated. And then you just end up checking these boxes all the time. Am I doing X, Y, and Z? Is it actually working? Or are you engaged in the process? If you're engaged in the process, keep it simple. Is this serving my clients? Is it not? Is it working or is it not? It doesn't make any difference how complicated, how it's just, you can't be a slave to your own system if the system doesn't serve you. Does it work? Is it accomplishing its vision? If it's not accomplishing the vision you had for it, then you have to regroup or scrap it altogether. But the answer is almost always going to be simplify. Don't complicate, simplify. I mean, if you have a history of not being able to carry out these different programs, then why you continue to complicate? Now, in business, a lot of times, guys, you do have to sometimes use a shotgun approach, right? Because you want to see what works, what doesn't for you, specifically if you're a smaller business. There's a lot of business guys that will say, hey, the reason I got here is because I tried a whole bunch of different stuff that failed, and then I found this that works really well, and I did it. Well, that's great. So what is working for you? It's the 80-20 principle. Maximize the 80-20 principle. Maximize the people that are giving you money. 80% of your people, or your programs, or your clientele, are producing, or 20% of your programs, I should say, or your people, or your clientele, are producing 80% of the results. So double down on that 20%. Don't worry about trying to appease all the rest of it. You're going to chase your tail. Focus on the stuff that's actually working, guys. Focus on what works. Does it work or does it not work? It's that simple. And if you can't measure it, like this club is trying to do this particular, install this particular program because they want to retain their members, but they don't even know how to, they don't really know how, if it's going to work or not. They don't even know what the end game is. I've actually asked them, well, how do you know when you've obtained this goal of yours, this vision to, first of all, what is your retention rate goal? What is it? How are you arriving at those numbers? Number two, and then how do you know when you've gotten there? Is it measurable? Do you know? What criteria says that you've hit those goals? They can't answer any of those questions. So let me get this straight. You've come up with this program without asking anybody who was actually running it prior for any sort of input whatsoever, where you could have avoided all these problems to start with. You put in a tremendous amount of energy, time, and effort and invested it into this program. Now, is it working? Well, you don't even know if it's working or not. Everyone's running around in circles. They feel a tremendous amount of burden and pressure that you've placed on these employees because they are good employees. You hired them, right? Right? You trust them, right? Okay. Well, if it's too difficult, then whose problem is it? If you're having experience in that in several different areas of your business and it keeps coming back to the same issues over and over again over time, well, that's the definition, guys, of insanity. If you can't easily track it, if you can't easily know when you're hitting the goal, if you don't know where the end zone is to score the touchdown, and you're just running, you're going to aimlessly run around the field if you don't know where it is. How in the world do you implement a system so complicated when you don't even, or not even take care of the basics, when you don't even know where the end zone is? And then to put all that pressure on your employees to carry this mission out that's seamlessly aimless, to get some vague return on this investment, and then you've already set the stage to blame these very same employees when it very predictably is not going to work. It's asinine and it's crazy. Now, I only bring this up to you not to point this one particular gym out. It's because you see this a lot in business. You see this a lot when you have egos. And what I'm trying to tell you is, look, if you work for a club and you are middle management or lower management, maybe you're just a worker, maybe you're a personal trainer. It's very little you can do a lot of times if you have somebody in place that are managers in place that are doing exactly what I'm describing. But maybe this is your own business. So you have to look at personal training, whether as a personal trainer, whether it's you're working for somebody else or it's literally your own business, it's still your own business, right? Are you standing in the way of your own business, right? Because this is not just a macro and you're working for some big gym. We're also talking about the individual people that are health and wellness professionals. Are you standing in your own way? Are you making things harder than it needs to be? Are you just doing things that cross boxes off every week? Or are you really engaged in the process? Like, so for example, one of the processes that this particular health club has is they literally want to take every member. Now, this is maybe possible if you have a very small club with very few members, right? Not a whole lot of traffic. But if you have 300 new members a month, for example, that's a sizable amount of volume to try to retain, right? To track. Well, you're going to have a whole team do that, number one, not just one person. This team has one person trying to do it, essentially, okay? And how are you going to carry that out? Logistically speaking, does that even make any sense on paper? 300 people you're trying to meet with all 300 of these people consistently, have touch points with these people so you can retain them. That's the theory. Try to get them in all the different programs that you have. All these programs aren't even run that well. I mean, precisely because you have so many programs and you only have a finite amount of resources as you would have in any business. And a lot of these people were never trained communication and sales skills. So whether they're trying to sell anything for money or not, you still have to get people excited about it. You still have to retain people. Remember, retention, guys, is sales applied over time. Sales skills applied over time. Once you sell somebody initially to be a part of your organization, well, the job's just starting. You have to continue to sell them. You have to continue to motivate them to display value, to build commitment over time so that they stay with you. Well, if you don't teach someone how to do that, how can you expect to retain them? You can have all these processes in the world, all these complicated processes in the world that will fail. But it doesn't matter because you have not established the foundation. You have not established the fundamentals. And what you're going to do is basically drive the people that you do have that do know what they're doing and who are very excited to be there. You're going to make them upset. Why are they going to stick around with you? They're good people. Why are they going to stay with you? They're going to leave and find something where people are valued, they're not pressured as much, and quite frankly, where they have systems in place they can actually implement that aren't so complicated that it's just a complete joke. So guys, keep it simple. If it's your own personal business, keep it simple, stupid. The old KISS analogy. Keep it simple, stupid. Whenever there's an opportunity to complicate or to simplify, always look to simplify. The direct path from point A to point B is going to be the best because it's going to be easiest, to implement. And remember, guys, you're always going to serve yourself. It's never a waste of time, in other words, to invest time, effort, and money and resources of all kinds into training your staff these communication skills, these retention skills. They're sales skills. You can call them anything you want, but they're sales skills. If that offends you or it scares you, just know that sales are not bad. Bad sales are bad. Good sales are building value. Good sales are building commitment. Good sales are being able to communicate and build relationships as a professional relationship builder. None of those things are going to hurt your business, are they? In fact, they're essential. So you better invest some time in that. And this particular gym, health club, did not or does not currently do that. So it doesn't matter what they're trying to implement, it's not going to work. And then on top of it, they double down and overcomplicate it. And then on top of that, they double down and said, hey, it's not our fault. It must be the employees at fault. Oh, really? All 100 and some employees or whatever it is, right? Really, it's all their fault? Or maybe this was never implemented properly to start with. You should have probably gone to some of these people who are doing this on a daily basis beforehand, gotten their input, But again, regardless whether it's your own business or whether it's a large business, keep it simple. Don't just check boxes, guys. Why are you doing it? Why are you doing this particular thing? Why are you having all these papers everywhere? And are you doing redundant behaviors? This is what's going on this gym. They're doing the same tracking mechanism 3 or 4 different ways, right? And then they have only a few people doing it, so it's very overwhelming. And then they're questioning, why can't these people do it? Well, I mean, there's only you're asking a lot. You're asking too much. It's not feasible, and then you're going to blame those people when they don't execute. Not a good idea, guys. Do not let your ego get in the way. Are you just checking boxes, or what's going to actually work better? Instead of having 3 different systems to do one thing, have one that everyone has access to. It's very simple. This new member comes in, take notes on it, put it in the system that everyone can see. And then if you meet with them again for touch points, that next person who meets with them puts in the same exact system, takes the exact same 30 seconds to do, click, quick, simple, efficient, everyone can see it, move on. That's how easy it is. Instead of doing 10,000 things to accomplish one step. Keep it simple, stupid. All right, guys, don't just check boxes. I think have I been redundant enough? I hope so. Don't just check boxes. Manage the process. Keep it simple. Always refer back to the fundamentals. Okay? And you really can't go wrong.